to thinking about going to the gym to build physical muscle. It's like, how do you build your mental muscle, your emotional muscle, your mental and emotional endurance, strength, flexibility, and balance?
If you're exhausted, you feel old. There are 5 root causes that lead to chronic fatigue. When you understand which one of those root causes are, then you can map out a plan in order to get a treatment protocol together.
It's not natural for us to drop into the body and be willing to feel the uncomfortable sensations that are there. That's why so many people hate to be still.
And I've literally seen diseases completely reverse in months in people, even cancers. Once they've started forgiving themselves or forgiving others or going through these mental emotional healing practices.
Our thoughts are so important because as we think about what we want, we are actually co-creating it. And the moment we start thinking about something else, we are now creating a different reality.
And my job is to bring people hope, to give them the stories, to let them read the testimonials, to know there is hope, there is help. Some of these things are very simple.
Welcome to the 6th episode of the Ageless docuseries. My name is Stefan and I'll be once again your guide along the way. I'm sure you've started recognizing some of our experts by now and you're definitely more aware about your body's true capabilities. Now it's time we dive a little bit deeper. As we briefly heard in episode 3, stress and anxiety can really make you age quickly. Because when you feel tense and anxious, your body starts releasing cortisol and dangerous hormones that breaks the elastin in your skin and makes your cell age faster. However, there's so much you can do to keep the stress and anxiety under control with very simple techniques. At Zonia, we have a whole section dedicated to your mental well-being that helps you deal with negative feelings through guided imagery, meditations, breathing work, hypnotherapy, and personal development shows. I like to think of these mental health bites like having your personal therapist 24/7 with just one click. Plus, on Zonia, you'll find carefully curated award-winning live-action, animation, and documentary short films that will inspire and bring positivity into your life. In just 10 to 20 minutes, these films will move you and open up your perspective about the world and the possibilities ahead. Check out all these resources and content by taking a moment to sign up to Zonia now. Zonia starts from as low as $10 a month and you are covered by our no questions asked 7-day money-back guarantee. You have plenty of time to check it out and see just how effective these techniques really are. Because for me and thousands of other people, it was life-changing. But I need to remind you that the special offer for Zonia is ending soon as the premiere of all 10 episodes of Ageless ends. So take action now and get full access to every single episode of this docuseries. You'll not need to stress if you're missing one or more episodes. If you decide to join later, all the health bites and other content will still be there, but the Ageless docuseries will be gone. Take a minute to check what's inside Zonia by clicking on the button below. Now, back to today's episode. I have to warn you, today's content may be a bit sensitive depending on your past personal experiences. We'll dive deeper into the science of trauma and address important topics on mental health. If you decide to stay with us, you'll learn how to let go of past trauma and guilt that may be accelerating your aging. Let's start with the basics though. We naturally face more stress and anxiety as we age and gain experience. While you cannot run away from that, you can certainly train yourself to be resilient. Here's how to build your emotional muscle without letting anxiety get the best of you.
One of the most important factors that ages us faster than anything else is anxiety. And, it shortens telomeres, it creates havoc in our microbiome, it disrupts our endocrine system with our hormone production, and it really affects the architecture of the brain, carving away parts of the brain, which make us have cognitive decline early. And one of the things that's been identified as the main cause of that anxiety is what every human has to confront at some point in life, and that is their own mortality. So death anxiety is actually the root of every anxious thought we ever have as humans. And people often say, no, I'm not afraid of dying. And it isn't the being afraid of dying that death anxiety is really talking about. It's all the tiny deaths that happen in every breath. The worry, the anxiety that the death of your fortune or the death of your reputation or the death of a relationship, the death of your own body as it's deteriorating. Everything that has ever sprouted in the plant kingdom, that's ever born in the animal kingdom, dies. And this is something that humans are uniquely situated for having to know that and try and live a happy life at the same time. Sometimes people never wake up to the fact that they have death anxiety. They die in the very typical life unexamined. It seems that different people will wake up to their mortality at different ages and stages in life. So there are some triggers that trigger people into this thought about their mortality. It could be a child that experiences the death of a pet, or a grandparent, or a parent, or a loved one. It could be somebody that's further along in their development, an adult that has the same experiences. It could be the deterioration of your own body. I often find that my patient population, if they have cancer or autoimmune disease, they start feeling betrayed by a body that is deteriorating, somehow feeling like it's not supposed to do that. And that's a really interesting thing that I notice in humans also, that we have an expectation that there's a shelf life period for our bodies, that we're supposed to live to X number of years without any kind of challenges. And if we do certain things like eat well and exercise and sleep and stay hydrated and think good thoughts, that we will live to that X number of years, that shelf life, and die in our sleep. No one ever promised us this. Even cars that come off a factory line in the same lot will have variances in them. And so we have variable bodies. We're all very, very different. And we're not going to have a specific number of years that we live to, in spite of all the actuaries' predictions about how long each generation is supposed to live. And it creates a sense of entitlement in us. And this creates more death anxiety and more feelings of being betrayed, feeling betrayed if what we expect is not happening. So all unhappiness comes from unmet expectations. This idea that we're never supposed to deteriorate is a false premise. So if you build your life on that, you're going to suffer. So there's a teaching that comes from Eastern philosophy, Buddhism specifically, where it said that in order for a bird to be able to fly and get to its potential, it has two wings that must work together. One wing is impermanence, which is the understanding that everything dies and you're confronting it. And the other one is compassion, having compassion for that reality. And when you think about the fairy tales that are told that I remember reading them to my children, right? Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Little Mermaid. There's always a happy ending and no one dies. And so when you think about how far we go to weave a delusion around life to keep us from this bird, right? Of really free flight that says, I need to have compassion for the reality that everything will die, including myself and everyone I love and the body that I inhabit, then it brings, instead of despair, a very big felt sense of gratitude and appreciation that that's not happening right now. You can be fully present in your life. You can bring joy to each breath in which you are still alive, and that your loved ones are with you, and that you're able to have the freedom to do the things that you love doing, to engage in your life purpose. So that's the compassion part of it, to know that that's there, confront it daily, and then look around and say, and that's not happening right now, therefore I am, and living it fully without numbing out.
There's a common myth with aging that it's inevitable that there be cognitive decline, that we run down and in terms of our ability to function. And we have a stereotype of old people, right? That they're typically like old and depressed, or that they're like, they're scared of everything. And it doesn't have to be that way. The only constant that goes with getting older is that you have more opportunity to have experienced stress, to have experienced adversity and trauma. After that, really, truly, what makes the difference and determines your mental health and your cognitive health, even your brain health, is how resilient you are. And resilient is a fancy way of saying, how adaptive are you? Like, what's your ability to adapt, to flex, to flow? I like to talk about it in terms of, like, we're used to thinking about going to the gym to build physical muscle, right? It's like, how do you build your mental muscle, your emotional muscle, your mental and emotional endurance, strength, flexibility, and balance, right? There's that flex and flow. It's that ability that when life throws the inevitable curveball, as it always does, is it going to smack you on the head, or are you going to hit it out of the park, right? That is the difference. And you can even see this change on functional MRI. In a brain that is healthy, that is resilient, on functional MRI, that's an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, that lights up with different colors based on what you're thinking about. On functional MRI, your prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain that sits behind your forehead, I like to call it your rockstar executive team. Right? When you are in stress, when you're in survival mode, that prefrontal cortex gets knocked offline. And that's a very important thing that you actually want to happen. Because in the olden days, if you were faced with a saber-toothed tiger eyeing you for its next meal, right, that's not the time to start thinking and go, let me think about this. Should I run? Should I stand and fight? Should I freeze and hope it doesn't notice me? Or should I fall over and play dead? And again, hope it loses interest or doesn't notice me, right? We have the same survival hardwired responses that animals do. A gazelle runs, a honey badger fights, a rabbit shivers in fear, and a possum plays dead. That's important in the short term, right? Because that is what can keep you alive. That's what it's meant to do. However, this is where you're in your prefrontal cortex, where you have the ability to think logically, to come up with creative solutions, to make good decisions, to actually act on those good decisions, and then to inhibit your emotions that might get in the way of action, like crying at the drop of a hat or flying off and hitting somebody, right? So that's why your prefrontal cortex is so very important. And when we're in survival mode, that threat happens, or it's a perceived threat by our unconscious mind, our hardwired stress response kicks in milliseconds. Nobody has control over that. However, just like you can lose power in your building, and then within minutes, or sometimes even seconds, the emergency power generator will come back on. It's like, whoop, and all of a sudden the lights come back on. That is what resilience does with your prefrontal cortex, your executive rockstar team. So you might get knocked off for a very short time, and then the more resilient you are, it comes back on, and guess what? You can think straight again. You can make the decisions, you can act on them, and you can find the solutions that will get you out of that quandary. And so this is the difference between healthy aging when it comes to your mental health or unhealthy, where you're living a life of depression, perhaps anxiety, fear, where everything just seems like a threat to you. And I'm going to say remorse. I've worked with so many people at the end of their lives who the predominant emotion that they felt is remorse, that they did not live life fully, that they allowed their fears to stop them from taking those steps, taking those chances. That's what the resilience is all about, that allows you to be comfortable with the uncertainty of stepping out and enjoying and experiencing life to the fullest.
The big threats that I find to longevity, it really comes down to one, if you can believe it, is stress. And here's why. Many people would chime in and say, well, it's diet, well, it's exercise, well, it's nutrient loss. But here's the thing, stress causes all of those problems. So if you're under stress, you're not digesting your food, you're not eating appropriately, you're not getting proper nutrition, and that kicks off a hamster wheel of symptoms that then develops things like cardiovascular disease, immune problems, sleep problems, and all these other things that all started from one thing. So for me, I'm really passionate about people understanding that role that stress has in our longevity and our health. And it's probably, in my opinion, the biggest obstacle to why our country is so sick, because we're not addressing it. We're not talking about it. So some of the signs that you might be under stress, that you might be missing, is you're going to a doctor's office and you have concern. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're not sleeping, maybe your menstrual cycles are off, and they're telling you that you're fine. You're completely normal. Your labs are great. There's nothing wrong with you. That's a sign that perhaps what's really going on is something functional, and that's a response to stress, and you haven't made it all the way to the disease diagnosis, so therefore you're being dismissed. So I always encourage anyone that's gone to a physician, feels like something's going on, and being told that there isn't something going on, that they should definitely look to stress as a possible culprit.
It sounds familiar, doesn't it? You have clear symptoms, yet the doctors cannot point out in any direction. Stressful emotions can be overwhelming and have many different forms. It surprises us how common it is for our guests to hear that their patients feel inadequate, deficient, and burned out. Bombarding yourself with these emotions can be cause of weight gain, high blood pressure, or ultimately even cancer. So stay with us, as there's a way to quit this negative cycle.
One of the things that I'm passionate about helping people with is, and to heal from, is what I call pathological imposter syndrome. And this is different than the imposter syndrome that most people and experts talk about, which is more of a mindset thing. Like, I've actually heard experts say, oh, this is just fear because you're starting something new and you don't feel like you know what you're doing, and so you're afraid. And so what you need to do is put your fear over in the passenger seat, and you let it know that you are driving the vehicle of your own life, and it can stay for the ride if you want. No. The pathological imposter syndrome is, I call it that deeper, darker, maybe the underbelly of an iceberg, where it's not incompetence, which is a lack of skill. It's feeling inadequate, deficient, broken, like I'm never going to be enough. And I work with a lot of purpose-driven high achievers, the stereotypical triple type A, perfectionist, stressed overachievers. And so many of them fit into this. And I have to admit, I was one. And that is where they feel like they're not enough, that they're not valuable, they're not lovable. So they have to keep achieving more and more and more, and going for the next degree or the next accolade or the bigger house or more cars. They keep looking for that magic thing that is going to make them finally feel enough. This is one of the biggest energy vampires that you can experience, right? So at the very time where these stressed overachievers are trying to push, and pedal to the metal and give it all it's got because I have to get that holy grail, their energy is being sucked down and out without them even knowing. So that, to use that analogy of a car, right? They have a leak in the fuel line. So they've got the foot, on the accelerator pedal, like pushed right down. They're trying to go as fast, as far as they can, and they're running on empty. That leads to burnout. It leads to what I call flame-out syndrome, and it leads to prematurely aging, so that you feel 10 years older than you are, for instance, and maybe pains are starting to pop up, and you're exhausted, and you've got brain fog, and you can't think straight, right? Those are all hallmarks of aging, and it doesn't have to be this way. So really, truly, that's why I'm so passionate about helping clients eradicate this pathological imposter syndrome, so that they can stop the leaks. They can rebuild themselves to where they need to be. And I truly believe that we can all be real life heroes. So that is what healing from pathological imposter syndrome can do for you. Flame-out syndrome is a term that I coined to really describe that catastrophic level of burnout. Burnout, by definition, by Dr. Freudenberger, who originally coined the term, he really meant it as only workplace related and talking about the mental and emotional impacts. And to this day, whether it's Dr. Christina Maslach, who created the burnout questionnaire, the World Health Organization even, still defines burnout as being only workplace related and only mental and emotional impacts, which I know from my own personal case is the farthest thing from the truth. So if burnout is only workplace, we've all been through something over the last few years that impacted us in more ways than just our work, right? In other words, stress can happen in your personal life, it can happen in work, absolutely. We need a broader definition. So it's looking at all stresses: physical, mental, emotional, chemical, environmental, even temperature can be a stress on the body. So we need a definition that looks at all of those causes and then going, okay, so if chronic stress can pile up from all of those different sources of stress, and if burnout's not it, what fits? So flame-out syndrome really is that constellation of symptoms that you can experience that includes the physical as well as the mental and emotional, and recognizes that it can happen from any part of your life, right? It can be from long drawn-out stress. It can happen from one sudden, overwhelming stress. The symptoms of flame-out syndrome are more than just the mental and emotional. They are the brain fog that you experience, that bone-deep exhaustion that's not just mental exhaustion. It's weight gain. It is pain and inflammation, which chronic stress causes. Can cause pain. It can also cause that weight gain I just talked about. It can cause autoimmune disorders. It can cause allergies. It can cause increased infections. It can cause diabetes, leading to Alzheimer's. It can cause high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. It can also cause cancer. Right? So really, truly, flame-out syndrome it was a pandemic before any recent little bug traveled the planet. At least a third of all adults have at least one chronic condition that is caused by stress. That's 18 years and over. The CDC and the World Health Organization says that mental health is going to be the next pandemic. Well, that pandemic is already here, and it's even bigger because it includes the physical. The top 10 killers worldwide are either directly caused by or contributed by stress.
The reality is scary, but it's not going to get better by itself. You have to start acting now before any of these syndromes turn into chronic fatigue where you don't even have the willpower to fight. And we'll give you the tools to make sure that exhaustion doesn't get an upper hand. If you're watching this and wondering whether you might be going through stages of chronic fatigue, we'll show you how to find out in a minute. And our guests will share their tactics to reprogram your brain so you can achieve more and have long-lasting energy.
Chronic fatigue is one of those misunderstood conditions. It's really when somebody has ongoing exhaustion that isn't better by rest. And it impacts longevity. Honestly, if you're exhausted, you feel old. And there's also people who have chronic fatigue syndrome, their immune system is dysregulated, their endocrine system can be dysregulated, and that sets them up for other conditions as well. The 5 root causes of chronic fatigue are something that I discovered in my journey of healing my chronic fatigue and working with hundreds of patients and understanding that there are known root causes. And once you understand what those are, it's a lot easier to get better faster and also to avoid relapse. The one is what I call the gateway root cause because so many people have it. It's the hormone triangle. It's that stress response that we have, the interaction between your adrenal glands, your thyroid, your ovaries or your testes, and your stress response being altered. So that's the first one. The second one is toxic exposure. A lot of us have too many toxins in our body, and that dysregulates the system. The third is mitochondrial dysfunction, and that's definitely interrelated with the toxic exposure. The fourth is chronic viral infection, which we're seeing so much more now on the planet because we had a big virus that came on the planet, and that is definitely leading to more fatigue caused by a viral infection. And then the fifth is limbic emotional, where the limbic brain, there's enough emotional trauma that the limbic brain becomes malfunctioning and alters the body. I think that a lot of people are underdiagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, and it's partly because the primary symptom is being tired. And so many people feel tired that they dismiss it, and they never think to ask their practitioner, gee, is there a possibility that I have chronic fatigue syndrome, or also called myalgic encephalitis? It's called chronic fatigue syndrome, ME. Is there a chance I could have this? So if you're wondering, if you're fatigued, if you're listening to this and you're wondering, gosh, am I just tired, or could I possibly have chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, going on, or do I have long haulers? Here are some things that I would say would be good to really notice about yourself in your day. So are you able to have a good night's sleep and wake up in the morning and feeling refreshed? If you are, that's great. Are you able to sustain that energy throughout the day? If you eat normally and move normally and do all the usual things that you do in a day, are you able to maintain a high energy level throughout that day? Or are you one of those people that knows that you have a few hours in the day that are really good for your energy and you book all of your important work at your high energy times because you know at some point you might crash? Or are you that person that after lunch or 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you have to take a nap, or you wish you could take a nap, or you're afraid you're going to fall asleep in the car? Or are you that person that energy budgets, where you're kind of like, well, I don't know if I can really go to the cocktail party with my friends because I might just be too tired the next day to go to work if I go out after work. These are all kind of subtle things. And I see people come to me who have these symptoms, who say they're tired and don't identify with having chronic fatigue or ME, and then they don't get the treatment and the support that they need. And they often think that it's just their fault. They think that, oh, I'm just being lazy. You know, I'm being lazy. If I went to the gym, I'd have more energy. If I just did this, if I did that, I'd have more energy. But it's like, no, there may be something that's sucking your energy away that you can actually get an effective treatment for so that you can start feeling better.
Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue are actually related, and I think of them on a continuum. So chronic fatigue has the symptoms of exhaustion, mental problems with mood and thinking, so depression, anxiety, brain fog, sleep disturbances. Sleep disturbances can be sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, but for sure not sleeping soundly. So when you wake up, you're still exhausted. If you add the symptoms of chronic fatigue and you add pain to that, now you have fibromyalgia. So it's really a continuum, and I think of chronic fatigue almost as a precursor. If you have chronic fatigue long enough and nothing is done about it, now you're going to get fibromyalgia, which is the chronic fatigue plus the pain. Fibromyalgia is definitely connected with aging because it is more common as you age. And I think of that as a total toxic load. So because the causes, even though traditional medicine says there is no cause, the underlying root causes is toxicity. Our toxic burden increases as we age because we accumulate more and more toxins over time, and combine that with the slight inefficiencies in our body as we naturally age, then we have this total toxic load that becomes overwhelming and we get sick. And in this case, the sickness is fibromyalgia.
The limbic brain is part of the emotional brain. It's part of the brain, and it is always surveying for safety and danger, safety and danger. Inside the limbic brain is part of our memory center, and it remembers things and it's part of our survival mechanism. If you think about the limbic brain as we evolved, has been so essential in helping us remember where are the berries that we need to pick so that they're really yummy so we get our nutrition. Where's the cliff that we don't want to fall off of? Like, this is very important for this limbic brain to always be remembering where our safety is and where our danger is. One of the things that happens is that when we are under a lot of stress, is that limbic brain is hyperactive and it's surveying more for the danger part of thing. We're very much wired to perceive danger. If you think about it, the reason that we're here is because our ancestors were really good at surviving. And that's why we're here today. So which means that we've inherited a really good limbic brain that's good for surveying danger. When a limbic brain is functioning normally, it's picking up information for safety and danger, and it just connects beautifully with the rest of the body. The limbic brain is in the brainstem. It's above the brainstem, and the frontal lobe comes over the top of it. And the frontal lobe kind of perceives, like, okay, the limbic brain is picking up this information, but I don't need to respond, such as you're walking down the street and you hear a car muffler go off, and you know, okay, that's a car muffler. Now, the thing that's interesting is that people respond differently to different stimulus based on their history. The limbic brain is very much connected to the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is something that we have that picks up information our whole living being, from in utero to present. And we've even discovered there are thoughts and feelings from our generational memory that comes in and affects that, which can make a big difference in terms of how you interpret a sound. That car muffler goes off. For one person, they're on the ground because they're sure it's a gunshot. Somebody else is like, oh, it's just a car muffler. And that depends on what's going on inside of your subconscious mind. What happens with the limbic brain often is that it begins to overwhelm that prefrontal cortex and starts to drive the show. And instead of having the prefrontal cortex say, oh, it's not so dangerous, it just starts to alter the way that your immune system functions, the way that your nervous system functions, and it can literally throw the body into chaos. And it amplifies experiences of pain and fatigue, basically telling the body, it is so dangerous out there, you need to just hide and stay in your cave. So people with chronic fatigue, people with chronic pain, often have a hyperactive limbic system, and that's what's affecting their system. And this creates a negative biofeedback with the body. If the body picks up pain signals or dysregulation in the gut, dysbiosis, that kind of thing, goes up through the vagus nerve, hits the limbic brain, tells the limbic brain things aren't safe in the world, and triggers something called the cell danger response, which actually slows down the mitochondria, slows down metabolism. And again, this is leading people to just experience more pain, more fatigue, so they go back and hide in their cave. Limbic retraining is an amazing way to get the brain to get back into its normal state. People who have limbic dysfunction often have things like multiple chemical sensitivity, or they have chronic fatigue or chronic pain, and they don't realize that their limbic brain is altered. There are different people who have specialties out there where there are people with limbic retraining programs. You have to think about the limbic brain as being a 3-year-old. So the way to fix your limbic brain is to actually go in and work with your brain as if it's a small child and it needs to be redirected. What you're doing is you're really settling down your autonomic nervous system so that it's not having such a strong stress response. One of the ways that I always love to share this with my patients is one of the things you're doing for the limbic brain, if somebody has has a chronic condition and they know that they're just in a habit. One of the things with limbic dysfunction is that the brain, the neuroplastic brain, has gotten stuck on a freeway and it just keeps going down the same path, the same path, the same path. Oh, I'm tired. 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 And it sends up this signal if I'm tired because that limbic brain's been trying to save you, to have you hide in the cave because the world is so dangerous. That's been its perception. So what you have to do in for limbic retraining is you have to activate your conscious mind. Only 5% is conscious thought. The rest is subconscious thought. So that subconscious has all of those beliefs that we have about ourselves when we were young. It has the generational memories in there, has the stuff you had from in utero. It has all of that stuck in there, plus all of your life experiences. That's in your subconscious mind, and that's informing your experience of your life. What you want to do for limbic retraining is utilize that 5% of your conscious mind and basically say, stop. Stop doing this. I don't buy this anymore. And you have to think about, you're talking like to a 3-year-old. It's kind of like when you're walking through a checkout register with a 3-year-old and they see the candy and they're like, I want the candy bar, I want the candy bar. And you're like, no, we're not gonna have the candy bar. And you just have to be clear as a parent and say, no, we're not doing that, and redirect. So you're gonna redirect and say, but let's see if we can go find some butterflies. Would that be fun? You're basically doing the same thing with your limbic brain, is that you're catching it when it's starting to go down that path of fatigue, of pain, and saying, no, we're not doing that. I love you, thank you, but no, we're not doing that. And we're redirecting to this other thing. And you wanna bring in, and what we're really doing is creating a new network and a new path for the life that you want to be living. We know from neurology, from neuroscience, that if we're feeling good, we're in a much more plastic state to be able to shift to a different new way. So we want to start bringing in good feelings. And so there are certain techniques that different specialists have in terms of having to invoke these very good feelings to stimulate your dopamine and your all of your feel-good neurotransmitters. And then start envisioning, what is it that I do want? What do I want to have this body to do? Because frankly, your brain doesn't literally know the difference between what's true or not true. So you can start telling your body a story about how it can be and start feeling the experience of how good it's going to feel when you're strong, when you have energy, when you're fully full of health, when you find that relationship or get your abundance, whatever it is, you start living in it now, and that rewrites the programs in your brain and in your body, and it begins to heal. When people say, how is it that I can treat chronic fatigue syndrome and ME? What's the treatment protocol for it? What I always have to say is it's highly individualized. This condition is not caused by one cause. There's not a single one test to identify whether somebody has chronic fatigue or ME, which is unfortunately why it's been dismissed so much by the medical community, because it doesn't fit into a neat, tidy little diagnostic box that they can check. This is an amorphous condition. It's complex. It has multiple etiologies. It has multiple causes. So each person that comes and sits in front of a physician and has the symptoms of chronic fatigue may have a different root cause. And it's part of the physician, the practitioner's job is to help that person figure out what is their root cause, or that's the person who has fatigue. That's the hunt they need to go on, is to figure out what is their root cause. When you know there are 5 root causes that lead to chronic fatigue, when you understand which one of those root causes are, then you can map out a plan in order to get a treatment protocol together. There are also 4 health foundations that need to be addressed. The 4 health foundations are digestion, detoxification, movement and breath, rhythm and sleep, and mindset and spirit.
That's quite unusual. Talking to your body and convincing it to heal seems unrealistic, but it can be effective. The inner dialogue you have with yourself can be powerful, but it can also break you. Some people's inner voice has been bad programming since childhood, which sets them up for further health issues. The topic of trauma can be quite difficult, and there are many myths about it. We often perceive trauma as a horrible event that haunts a person, but it's actually completely different. Listen to Dr. Amy Apigian, who will explain the biology of trauma and will also share her proven method for healing trauma.
So one of the great things about the nervous system and the human body and how it's designed is that it likes to form patterns, and the body loves predictability. It loves routine. It loves to do things with the least amount of energy. And so that's why it forms habits. And you can see habits in every area of your life that you do it automatically because this is how you've always done it now. And that's the same thing with stress and trauma responses actually. So the more times in our life that we go into this trauma response, the more it becomes primed to just continue to go to that place. And in fact, the earlier that this overwhelming experience happened for a person, the more primed they are to naturally go into that trauma response. Babies, infants, their nervous system is still developing, and so it is actually quite easy with many of the common parenting practices for them to experience overwhelm, and the only way that they have possible to survive that overwhelming body sensation is to use their emergency brake, that dorsal vagal response, go into the trauma response to dissociate from these very uncomfortable body sensations that they're having. And then what happens is that the body, the autonomic nervous system, is now trained to think that, oh, with any stress, it's too big for me. I can't handle it. Even if it's a minor stress to somebody else, to our system, it's already automatically programmed in that any stress is going to be too much for us. And so we still have that stress response initially, that trigger, and then the anxiety. But for many of us, we spend so little time in that because our system automatically goes into that trauma response, having been programmed from earlier life experiences. I can't handle any stress. Any stress is too much for me. What causes trauma? This is a conversation that we really need to bring to light because many people assume, and they've been taught, that it's an event. A trauma is an event, and they've classified it even to be a big T trauma or a little t trauma. And they're looking at the event, and trauma is not an event. Trauma is not an event. Trauma is the body's response to an experience. And so 2 people can go through the same experience, one coming out having had trauma from that, another person being fine because it's not the event itself, it's their body's experience. There's so many factors that go into each person's experience, and that includes their genetics, that includes their epigenetics, that includes their internal resources for ATP, energy, their detoxification system, their methylation system, their nutrients. Everything that goes into creating the internal resources for a body is going to set the limit, that line for, is this just going to be a stress for you, or is this going to take you over that line and be a trauma for you? So the definition of trauma that I have come to land on is trauma is anything that for any reason at that time overwhelmed your body's ability to cope with it. Anything. And so when we look at anything, it can be, yes, that the situation was overwhelming. Perhaps it was an emotional situation. Perhaps it was a psychological association. But actually, if your body had more of the internal resources, it would have been able to stay with that stress, meet that stress, and not feel that that stress was so big, too big, and we had to go into the trauma response in order to survive that. Most of us know that we have had some trauma. And then the question is, so what do we do about it? What I was always taught, and even taught going through medical school, you send them to therapy, right? And so I would have patients come to me, and some of their emotional issues, challenges, struggles were more obvious than others. And that was always my answer, right? Like, here is the medical part of things. And then for this part, go to therapy. And what I have discovered along the way, partly through my own healing journey, as well as working with my foster son who I adopted, was that so many people try to start processing therapy before they have the other arm of healing trauma that they need, which is regulation. And if you think about the body being this system of wires, and the nervous system is a system of wires, it's these wires of communication. And what happens with trauma is that all of those wires get disorganized and they're not in a flow. They're not efficient. And so a trigger comes in and it's like causing all of this chaos, this internal chaos. And that's exactly what's happening in your nervous system. And if that is still the state of your nervous system, trying to process therapy, and this can be talking about it, talking about the story, processing, let me analyze the story, let me bring meaning to the story, let me change my, reframe my story, reframe my childhood. Or maybe they're going to do psychedelics and try to process things through a ceremony or whatever it is, but they're trying to process when their system itself is still chaotic and disorganized. You have to create efficiency and flow in the system to then be able to process therapy. And when you do that in that order, your capacity for processing is so much more there. And people are able to process a lot more and do it safely when they have done that work of what we call self-regulation first. And regulation refers to bringing order and organization and flow and efficiency to your nervous system, being able to know what state are you in the moment and having the tools to shift that and stay within your window of tolerance and not letting yourself go into that emotional, unmanageable space where you feel like you've jumped off, a cliff and you forgot your parachute and the emotions are just taking you down the spiral or the rabbit hole. So that would be the most important thing that people need to know, is that there's a specific sequence, and rather than starting with processing therapy and talking about the story and analyzing it, that's actually going to re-trigger the trauma response. And this is why many people leave therapy and feel exhausted. And for days, they feel a little lost and they're walking through a fog and just going through the motions of their life. That's actually the trauma response. And in the process of processing, they have re-overwhelmed their system and they're constantly re-triggering it and making the original trauma even greater, have a greater effect on their system. Rather than the first place is, actually, we don't talk about the story. Like, we don't do any of that yet. Let us build the system, rebuild the system, repair the system so that then it can support processing and be able to do it in a safe way. So when I look at how are we going to help people regulate their system, rebuild and repair their system to be ready for processing trauma, I love to use somatic work for this. And somatic is the Latin word for like your actual tissues, like your body, your muscles. And so many of us live in our heads. And so it's natural for us to go into the analyzing and stay in the thoughts of it. It's hard for us. Like this is not natural for us. This is not a natural part of our culture anymore. It's not natural for us to drop into the body and be willing to feel the uncomfortable sensations that are there. That's why so many people hate to be still. They hate the silence. They always need noise. They always need the TV on. They always need music on. They always need something going on, because in the stillness, they start to feel the uncomfortable. There's space for that discomfort, and they don't like it. It's uncomfortable. And so we constantly have lived our lives in a way of shutting that down and let me just get through my day. And I'm at the end of my day. I feel that uncomfortableness coming up. Let me drink a glass of wine. Let me lose myself in social media. Let me binge watch movies or a series or whatever it is. And we constantly live our lives trying to avoid the sensations actually coming from our body. So when we start somatic work, it is very important to also do it in a very slow, gentle way that is at the pace that your body is ready for. Because you can also do somatic work too much too fast. And too much too fast is still a trigger for the trauma response. And if you are a person who is not used to dropping into your body and letting yourself feel, how does my stomach feel right now? Oh, I do have a knot in my stomach. Oh, let me explore that knot. If you're not used to doing that, it's going to take time. It's like going to the gym. You can't go to the gym and lift 200 pounds on the first day. You have to build your skills. You have to build those muscles. So I have found somatic work to be so essential for this process, and then just to maintain this new relationship with your body. And in that way, not only kind of heal, repair, rebuild what has happened in the past, but then prevent yourself from experiencing trauma in the future, because you're already in tuned. You're already more resourced going into life stressors that we may not always know are coming. There are many different ways to do somatic work. And I was trained in somatic experiencing and then even moved on to neuroaffective touch. And that is one modality. There are many different modalities for working with the body. But the idea is that you use your mind to pay attention to an area in your body. So it's not like you're disconnecting your mind and saying, all right, mind, you're useless, go into your corner, and we're just gonna do body work now. It's really connecting that mind and using it to put attention. And that is really so much of the healing process is intention and attention. And when we put attention on an area of our body, then it allows it to move and to shift, and we can follow those movements, follow those shifts. And then what happens is that these impulses come up, and we have this impulse to move our arm in a certain way or to provide support in a certain way. So what I specifically do in my 21-day journey, how I've applied somatic work, is that I teach very specific skills, exercises that involve movements. They involve touch. They involve a direct way of working with your body so that you can get in touch with whatever is happening in your body. And there are some uncomfortable things and there are some comfortable things. But being able to then know how to track and how to follow those impulses of your body. And what happens is that when we start to do that, the body has what it needs to heal. And we're facilitating the process. Whereas before we're blocking it because with our mind, it's like, no, that doesn't make sense. Why would I want to move my arm that way? It doesn't make sense, so I'm not going to do it. Whereas when we do the somatic work, it's giving that body the freedom to say, oh, you're working through a memory right now. The body has memory. The body has implicit memory and the body has procedural memory. That's not even in the mind. The mind just has the explicit memory. So there are memories in our body that are only processed and worked through with the impulses and following those impulses. And that's what we get to do with the somatic work.
Kaiser Permanente did one of the largest studies ever done in the 90s and on the effects of childhood adverse events. As a child, if you live through a divorce, or a parent or family member going to jail, or rape, or physical or emotional or mental or verbal abuse, or a parent smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol. Any number of these things are considered an adverse event that adversely affect the child's life as they age. And so they followed thousands of people and studied them, and they realized that the more of these adverse events that you had in your life as a child, the more risk you had for just about every chronic disease on the planet, the more risk you had for a reduced lifespan, literally up to 20 years reduction of lifespan. So if you had like 3 or more of ACEs, adverse childhood events, you had 20 years less to live than people who didn't have them. And worse, you generally adopted the same habits or similar habits. And these adverse events, they live with us subconsciously or unconsciously, and they lead to living a stressful life. So basically they're lodged inside of us, right? And it's more of the habits that we develop from those who we love, those who we grew up with, those who we learn from, that lead to the habits in our own life that lead to those diseases or shortened lifespan. Well, the good news is that once we become aware of them, then we can change them. We don't have to live with them, and it doesn't have to shorten our lifespan. Many people who smoke and drink and eat fried food and live a stressful life, very stressful life, whether they're living in anger all the time, jealousy, hatred, envy, sadness, depression for years and years and years and years. You can see somebody who's lived, and everybody watching this could probably think of somebody who is an example of this, somebody who's maybe 40 or 50, but they look 60 or 70, and vice versa. We all know somebody who's 60 or 70, and they have the energy and vitality and health of a 40-year-old, a healthy 40-year-old. And to me, that's amazing. And it's not genetics. People go, oh, that's genetics. Yeah, for 1%, maybe 5% of people, it's genetics. But most of that is our mental and emotional well-being. And behind that, diet and lifestyle and habits, exercise, a lot of things that we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about, but really focusing in on, all right, we've got to address these underlying childhood adverse events. We need to go into practices that are proven, scientifically proven, to help us release these events from our physiology. Because what happens when you have a trauma, and whatever that trauma is for you that you take on, however extreme or little it is, that we take it on subconsciously or unconsciously, our body stores that trauma, our brain releases neuropeptides into the tissue, and that starts to generate a chronic inflammatory process. And that can happen for decades. We're holding on these traumas for decades. And so the chronic inflammation is leading to the disease, and it's leading to the degeneration of the cells of the body, which is leading to premature aging. Some proven ways to deal with those kinds of things is forgiveness practice. So really going inside and meditating and asking the question is, who do I need to forgive? Oftentimes it's ourselves we need to forgive, and really go deep into our own forgiveness of ourselves because we blame ourselves so much. Maybe it's our parents we need to forgive. Maybe it's someone who abused us that we need to forgive. We're not forgiving them for them or for the action that they took. We're forgiving them because we're holding on to that and it's destroying us. Another great practice that I love is Ho'oponopono. It's a Hawaiian practice. And you can practice this all the time. You can practice it in your mind. You can practice it. I practice it with my kids, with myself, with others. If I feel that I said something or made a mistake or felt bad about something that I did, I'll practice this phrase, and it's super simple. It's, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And you go through this, and you can repeat it as many times as you need, quietly or out loud, until you really feel the energy of it. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And it's so powerful if you have someone who's open to receiving that, you practice together. I promise you'll both be in tears because of the emotional release that can come from that. What's amazing is when you release them, all of a sudden, in many people's lives, health issues improve. And I've literally seen diseases completely reverse in months in people, even cancers, once they've started forgiving themselves or forgiving others or going through these mental emotional healing practices, that's how powerful this is. And what it's going to do is it's going to increase the quality of your life, and in so doing, potentially increase the length of your life as well.
So Susan actually came to me when she was in her early 60s. Imagine, decades. And she had done so many therapies. She had been on so many antidepressants and then anti-anxiety medications. She had gotten married and was having a lot of challenges in her marriage because of her own lack of self-worth, and never feeling like there was going to be stability in that relationship, always feeling like he was going to leave her. It was just around the corner. And so she was always on the edge of her seat, waiting for that, making sure that everything was perfect, being the sweet, compliant wife, just like she was the sweet, compliant daughter. But yet her internal anxiety was so great that she would start having panic attacks. And of course, she tried to hide this from her friends, tried to hide this from her husband, but then that's when she started to get on the medications. Another thing that happened was that her health started to deteriorate, and we see this a lot. And early life experiences that are overwhelming, and they start this pattern in the biology. That biology usually takes decades to surface. And so you start seeing trauma-related diseases surfacing in your 30s usually. If it's surfacing earlier, that just shows the degree of dysregulation that your system experienced earlier in life. But around early 30s, depending on your life, right? Depending on whether you've already been pregnant or the additional stressors that you have had. But here she is in her 60s, and her thyroid is shot. She has the chronic fatigue. She is really struggling just to keep up with her grandkids now, and that's what she wants most in life to do. And so she comes into my program. She starts with the 21-day journey, and she starts to make this connection with her body. She's always lived in her head, always thought through everything. What do I need to do now? What do I need to do to keep my husband happy and not have him leave me, because I couldn't survive if he left me too. And as she started to make this connection with her body, you could just see her coming to life. And you could see it was like these layers of protection that she had put around her heart, protection around her stomach, because that's a very vulnerable area. And she had lived her life very tense and very braced. Her shoulders were always up. And to see her slowly, this takes time, but slowly start to come alive, she now has the brightest smile. She now has the most quick, cheerful laugh out of all of the group. And she constantly tells me every time that I've seen her, and she's also had her husband come and tell me, she'll say that, oh, Michael wants to say hi to you, and he wants to just express his gratitude, because they consider that the work that she is doing now to repair the trauma patterns that she's had her whole life is what's saving their marriage, is what is actually giving them the best time in their marriage that they've ever had. And her relationship with herself has so dramatically changed. She now sees herself as worthy. She now sees herself as worthy of time, worthy of taking care of herself, worthy of investing in hobbies that before she just wouldn't do because she didn't see herself as being worth it. Her latest thing is that she feels like she's stepped into her purpose in life, where now she's able to give back and she's able to lead other people through the similar journey that she did. And she helps me run the 21-day journey and leads breakout groups, and being part of the transformation that other people are doing to look at their patterns and then have the tools to change them. It is truly the most beautiful thing to witness this.
At the beginning of the series, I told you how shifting your mindset will be one of the crucial steps to achieving longevity. You now have proof of how vital it is to not ignore your emotions. If you're inspired to start rewiring your mindset, we have a few starting points for you. They will help you change your perception and let positive emotions in. Keep watching to see how spiritual healing can give you purpose and joy.
Whenever you're looking at a human being, we have our physical body, we have our mental emotional body, and we also have our spiritual and energetic body. And this isn't woo-woo, this is science. This is something that we can actually measure and test and see in people at this time, and we're getting more and more technology to appreciate that, which is great. It's so important for us to attend to our mindset and our spiritual bodies and our energy bodies, because this impacts that physical body. All three layers impact each other. Some of the ways that you can begin to work on your mindset and spirit and bring this in, I call it flossing your mind every day. Just like brushing your teeth every day, you need to brush and floss your mind every day. Once you start making this a daily practice, it's something that begins to actually shift the way that you're thinking, perceiving the world, and this has a beautiful downstream effect, and it actually alters your physiology. Some of the things that I love to do, obviously meditation is one of those great things that we all know about, but there are other things that we can do in the day. One is that we can actually start working on some of our energetic boundaries. A lot of people who deal with chronic illness and chronic disease are the people that are quite empathic. They've become very good at picking up energy from other people. Often people who have chronic disease had some sort of trauma in their childhood where their position of safety was one to really understand and read the people in the room. Is dad in a good mood or a bad mood? Is mom drinking or not drinking? Whatever it is. These are things that we got really sophisticated at as children, and we're very good at picking up energy. Some people are just born great empaths. It doesn't even have to be from trauma. One of the things that we can do for the mindset spirit piece is to just work on clearing our energy field from other people's energies throughout the day. And this can be a really great practice to have, and it can be just something as simple as anything that's not mine, please leave. Anything that's not mine, please leave can just be so simple. It can also be so simple as just imagining a bubble around you, and then anything that doesn't feel good, you could just imagine that leaving that bubble and then just bringing in love, light, peace, joy, and gratitude. And that can come in and fill your bubble, and then you're in your happy bubble. And that creates this different energy field that literally impacts how your cells, the energy, it has an energy imprint that affects your physical cells that actually impacts how your DNA works and what proteins come out and can alter your immune system for the better. We have a lot more control of our emotions than we give ourselves credit for. We often think it's because other people did stuff to us that we're in a bad mood. It actually has a lot more to do with ourselves and how we're feeling about who we are in this moment. So another one of the mindset and spirit daily practices that is really great to do is to just keep working on your subconscious mind. If you're feeling like you are highly self-critical of yourself, if you don't feel good about yourself in a day, it's usually because there are subconscious beliefs that are stuck in your subconscious mind. And taking some time to do some work on a subconscious level will start to liberate that. Joe Dispenza explains it in a really great way. He says we usually walk around with this how we feel about ourselves here, and then sort of how we let others broadcast who we are out in the world, and there's a gap. We don't actually believe that we're as good as how we broadcast ourselves to be. But once we start working on our subconscious mind and healing those old beliefs with us, start working with our inner child, do emotional freedom technique tapping, work with a hypnotherapist, do EMDR, any of those techniques that actually work with the subconscious mind, that is powerful therapy that we can do every single day on ourselves, or we can get a practitioner to work with us and can begin to shift subconscious mind and tap us into a deeper level of being able to be connected with ourselves on a higher level.
When we talk about brain health and aging and longevity, this is a dynamic subject that doesn't just start with the brain. So I often say that, we've talked a lot, I think, in this series about leaky gut, right? Leaky gut leads to leaky brain. That's probably been brought up by a lot of experts, yes? So I say that before leaky gut comes leaky boundaries. And leaky boundaries mean the boundaries that you have with yourself. So do you have boundaries with your own thoughts? In other words, I've had a bad day, therefore I deserve a quart of Ben & Jerry's on the TV in front of Netflix. Or this person treated me badly, so therefore I am entitled to rage at them, and have my emotions govern me into unhealthy lifestyle choices. That's leaky boundaries. Sometimes people hear the word boundary and think you're supposed to have a boundary with all those people out there, all those toxic people. Yes, true. And it begins with you and your own thoughts. So if you have learned how to have good boundaries with yourself, then that creates a sense of equanimity and peace. And when you have equanimity and peace inside your system and it can't get activated and triggered over and over again, your gut heals. You don't have leaky gut anymore. And when you don't have leaky gut, you don't have leaky brain, leaky brain is really interesting because these little microglia are much like your mast cells in your immune system. So in your body general, when you have leaky gut and chemicals, foods that your immune system is upset with cross through the barrier, mast cells will be activated along with other things and start attacking, and you form antibodies against a lot of your external world. You have an internal world that's also going around inside your brain, these little microglia that are carving away parts of your brain, little scissors. And they're saying, okay, if you're a zebra being chased by a lion and you think you're about to get eaten, your brain function narrows, your perceptual field narrows just to get you to survival. Like it's only the horizon. You're not noticing the bird song. You're not noticing the way the sun feels or the ground beneath your hooves as you're running as a zebra. You're just thinking about the danger and safety. So what the microglia do is it's kind of like an airplane getting rid of fuel when it's going down, right? It's like getting rid of everything it needs to. That's what your brain will do when you're perceiving yourself as constantly in danger. It offloads. So it'll start carving away synaptic pathways, connections between parts of your brain that you really want to speak to each other. And so now you have cognitive decline. So when we start talking about that, it comes back to this idea of bringing peace and equanimity to your own self through having good boundaries with your own thoughts.
So often we worry about the little things. Did I wear the right color shoes? What is someone going to think of my shirt? Am I going to be late to work today? When what we really need to be looking at is, wow, I woke up today and I'm alive and I'm present and I can give my positive energy to somebody else. So I always encourage that energy to be passed around because it doesn't only lower your stress, but it lowers everybody else's stress. So when I graduated medical school, I knew that I wanted to work with the endocrine system, and I knew that stress and hormones and gut health kind of all intertwined, and I built my practice on that. And I did, I think, what most physicians who treat adrenal fatigue do. I really focused with my patients on diet, and I focused with them on lifestyle measures, exercise and supplements, and they got better, and we didn't spend a ton of time on that mind-body connection. We spent a little, right? And they did see results, and I built a practice on that, and that was great. But there was a moment in my life where the trajectory of incorporating the mental health component really changed for me and helped me decide that I wanted to get out there and talk about this more. And my mom was my very best friend, very close to me, helped me open my practice. We grew it from the ground up. My best friend, my confidant, and 13 years prior to her death, she was diagnosed with cancer, lymphoma, and we had held it at bay for 12 years, which was a proud accomplishment. She felt great. But in that last year, she declined, and she declined very rapidly, losing a ton of weight, unable to walk, going from somebody that was very active, very involved with her grandchildren, very involved in my business, now being bedridden, needing assistance to walk from her bed to the bathroom, needing assistance going to the bathroom, dressing, eating, and it was a very painful thing to watch. And I have this memory, and it's a very vivid memory, and it was about 3 weeks before she passed, and I was laying in her bed. We were cuddling and just spending time. We were watching decorating shows on HCTV because that's what she loved to do. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, do you have any regrets in your life? And she said, I have one. She said, I wish I wouldn't have spent so much time worrying about that 10 pounds that I couldn't lose. And she said, because I would give anything to have that 10 pounds right now. And I remember sitting there and thinking, wow, what a powerful statement. Because it's so easy to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and critique yourself. and point out all the things that you hate about yourself or that you don't feel are visually great about yourself. Yet then you go make yourself breakfast, you go to the bathroom, you get in your car, you go to work. And here's a woman who couldn't even get out of bed to go to the bathroom. And the thing that she's thinking about was why she spent all that time and missed all that time, over 10 pounds. And there was a shift in me at that moment. There was a shift in me not only as a physician and what I do for my patients, but also as a mom, and looking at my kids and saying, wow, how many moments do I take for granted? Where maybe I'm worrying about something that's totally irrelevant, and my kids are right in front of me living, and I'm not living with them. And it kind of goes back to the idea that we live our lives in autopilot, and we live our lives in social media where we're worried about what everybody else thinks, and we're missing something so important, and that is being right here, right now, and being just grateful for the fact that we're alive, that we can walk to the bathroom, that we get to spend time with our kids, and that we even have the energy to think about our weight. Like, that's a blessing too. So what I try to teach people is when you have a symptom, no matter what it is, instead of turning negative toward it and saying, gosh, I hate this, I always have heartburn, I don't know what to do, instead look at it as, what is my body trying to tell me? My body's trying to communicate with me that there's something I need to pay attention to. So thank your body. Thank you, body, for telling me that there's something in my digestion that I need to do. And if you start looking at life in that way, and you start looking at stress in that way, and you start looking at health in that way, health changes. I saw people getting well prior to incorporating this. I see people thriving now because they just don't let those little stupid things, get in their way.
Highest frequency is joy. And what I encourage people to do is find things that help them get healthy, but also bring them joy. So a really good example would be going to the gym. Some people despise going to the gym. It doesn't bring them any joy. It only brings them discomfort and pain, and they don't even look forward to it. So find things that are joyful when it comes to movement that you actually look forward to. It could be going for a walk with a friend. It could be playing with your children. It could be playing a game of pickup basketball. So joy is something that we want to find more of in our lives, especially if we want to live long, right? There's no sense in living long and being miserable. You want to live long and have a joyful life. And so find joy in cooking, find joy in movement, find joy in your relationships, and that's going to help you vibrate at a whole different level. You're going to show up everywhere you go, and people are going to be magnetized to your personality. They're going to be magnetized to your energy, and you're going to lift the energy in any room that you walk into. So joy is one of the key things that we encourage people to find in their lives. One way that we can become more proactive with our health is actually changing our perspective and our paradigm. So many of us are familiar with the prevention paradigm, and with over 10,000 different diagnosable diseases, how many are you going to try to prevent? Right? When I want to go somewhere and I put an address into my GPS, I don't tell it all the places I don't want to go, hoping that I'm going to end up where I want to go. What I do is I identify exactly where I want to go, and then I move in that direction. And my GPS actually is allowing me and enabling me to find the fastest, safest route to get there. And so when it comes to our health, when it comes to longevity, when it comes to wellness, when it comes to vitality, the goal should never be prevention. The goal should be, where do I want to go, and what are the tools and skills and actions that I need to take that are going to help me get there? And when you know where you want to go, the questions become very clear, and the answers actually become even much more clear to us. Another analogy that I might add to that is, I think about when you have a business plan. You don't have a bankruptcy prevention plan. You actually have a business plan, which is going to help you create a business of your dreams. When you get married to somebody, you don't manage a relationship on the premise that you're trying to prevent a divorce. You manage a relationship based on, how do I create an amazing, life with this individual? So our health is the same way. The things that we give attention to, so everything that we're trying to prevent, we're actually co-creating, because we are co-creators with the universe. So for example, if I tell someone not to think about a pink elephant, that's exactly what they're going to start thinking about. When we tell someone that when someone says they're preventing cancer, what they don't realize is that's exactly what they're creating, because they're giving cancer their mental faculties, thought vibrations, and energy. So instead of preventing things, let's focus on what we want to create. Let's create vitality for ourselves, and the answers become so much more clear that way. A magnificent obsession is something that Napoleon Hill talks about in his book, Think and Grow Rich. Now, Think and Grow Rich is more about, material riches. It's actually how to live a rich life. And what he taps into is the ability of our brain to co-create our reality. Our brain is the most sophisticated instrument on the entire planet and in the entire known cosmos. And it produces thought vibrations. These thought vibrations have the ability, because we are quantumly entangled with every atom in the universe, has the ability to actually co-create the reality that we see in front of us, either instantly or at some point into the future. Now, one of the things that happens, especially in today's world, is we're so distracted. And when we are distracted, our thought vibration and our thought frequency starts to change. So we are no longer able to create the reality that we had once envisioned. Think about it this way. Think of your vibrations like tuning into a radio station. If your favorite song comes on and somebody keeps changing the radio station and you're tuning into a different radio station, you're going to start hearing a different song. And so our thoughts are so important, because as we think about what we want, we are actually co-creating it. And the moment we start thinking about something else, we are now creating a different reality. We are now creating a different world. So focus is so vitally important. If I want to destroy somebody's potential, their human potential, their business potential, all I have to do is keep them distracted. I have to keep them thinking about all the things that they don't want to do, instead of keeping them thinking or getting them to continue to think about the things that they do want to create. So that magnificent obsession is really tapping into what it is that we want to do with our lives, what it is that we want to create with this beautiful world and this opportunity that we have. And I would say my magnificent obsession is to figure out how to keep the world healthy, happy, and whole, how to help people become their own best doctor, how how to help moms and dads raise healthy children by modeling health to their children, not taking them to a doctor and having somebody else try to figure it out, but them being empowered with that capability. And my son, for example, is a shining example of that. He has Dr. Dad and Dr. Mom to keep him nice and healthy. He doesn't have a pediatrician. He's never been to the doctor. He's never been on any medications, because we know how to take care of him. And because we have that obsession of how do we take the best care of him and teach him how he can take the best care of himself. And we want that for as many people as possible.
People always ask me my anti-aging secrets. Well, part of it is I live with life's rhythms. I get up in the morning, I get some light, I start with a meditation. Meditation doesn't have to be long, but then I also start with a gratitude journal. I write down 10 things that I'm grateful for. What you focus on grows. Then I'll have a collagen drink with a little glutathione and vitamin C because it helps skin, bone, hairs, and nails. I'll exercise, and I always take a little bit of time for myself. Sometimes it's just a 5-minute break where I'll do that heart math, where I focus on something I'm grateful for and do some deep belly breathing. I do this in between patients because I want to be fully present for everyone I see. And I have a life's purpose. I love what I do, and I have joy. I find joy, whether it's being out in nature, laughing with some of my friends. People focus just on diet, exercise, sleep. Yes, those are extremely important. But joy, feeling that joy and finding something that's joyful for you can really anti-age you. And that's what I love. What's life if it's not enjoyable?
We've touched a bit on a few techniques already, which can help you clear your energy and stay calm in tough situations. But we saved the best for last. The techniques we're about to show you will release physical tension in your body. These tips will be especially valuable for shallow breathers and people with cardiovascular diseases. Watch this.
It turns out that psychosocial stress is probably the most predominant issue that creates cardiovascular mortality. More than smoking, more than lipids, more than glucose, being a diabetic. It's about stress. And when we're under stress, we don't breathe as deep. We become shallow breathers. And so when I can breathe deeply and I reset my nervous system, I'm letting go of all the adrenaline and noradrenaline that is causing my blood vessels to just constrict and reduce blood to all my tissues and organs. And now I can release that. I can restore the balance between my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. I restore what's called vagal tone, the way my brain communicates whether I'm in fight or flight or in a non-alarm event. And I've got to tell you, it's one of the biggest things that I do with people day in and day out is, look, just do box breathing 4 minutes twice a day. If you can't do yoga, if you don't have time for meditation, and meditation isn't box breathing anyway. Meditation is, I'm trying to quiet my mind. Box breathing is an active exercise where you're expanding the diaphragm in the lungs and you're allowing that diaphragm to drop, and that sends a signal to your brain. Things are okay. And I think that's the one thing that everybody can do is learn to breathe a little deeper. I think there is a term called don't sweat the small stuff. It's really important to understand how cortisol works and why breathing deep makes such a big difference. So your body, when you're releasing cortisol, it is supposed to go high in the morning, drop at noon, drop again in the evening, and then drop really low at bedtime so that you release melatonin, you release growth hormone, and you go into what's called deep wave sleep so you can rejuvenate your brain and your nervous system and all your tissues for the next day. When you flatten your cortisol curve, so now all of a sudden your body thinks you're in fight or flight all day long, and so you flatten the curve. Flattening of the cortisol curve is most predictive for future cardiovascular disease risk, diabetes risk, mood disorders, and even cancers. So flattening of your cortisol curve is, for me, one of the most important things to have people understand how to manage that. Managing your cortisol, managing your insulin. You can get those two things right, you're gonna go a long way towards living a healthy life.
So how we breathe matters. In fact, one of the best predictors of lifespan is lung capacity. Many people, because of chronic stress, they actually breathe very shallow and they never actually take full deep breaths. And one thing that is important to keep in mind is the importance of our diaphragm. Our diaphragm is also known as the second heart. So 40% of the pressure that our heart creates is actually coming from the rhythmic action of the diaphragm. So if you think about breathing, our heart is located, very conveniently located between our two lungs, and it sits on top of our diaphragm. So as we breathe and our lung expands and our diaphragm moves up and down, that actually mechanically assists our heart in pumping blood. When we don't breathe properly, our heart actually has to work harder to circulate blood to the rest of the body. Another thing that's important with longevity and breathing is lymphatic flow. So our diaphragm actually acts as a pump for the lymphatic system. So many cancers and diseases, as we know, start in the trunk organs. The trunk organs have tons of lymph that they produce. In fact, we produce about 12 liters of lymph every single day. We only have 5 liters of blood, but we produce 12 liters of lymph every day. And lymph is like the sewage. It's the waste products that our cells produce. And if we don't move that lymph, it becomes stagnant and it serves as basically a disease harboring environment. So our diaphragm, as it moves up and down, acts as a pump to pump all the lymph out of these organs, out of our kidneys, out of our liver, out of our digestive organs, and it moves that lymph so that it can be removed from those organs. In the rest of our body, for example, in our arms and legs, we actually have the lymphatic system woven into the muscles. In our core, our diaphragm and our abdominal muscles are responsible for creating that pumping action to move lymph. And so proper breathing makes such a huge difference there. When it comes to lung capacity, some of the exercises that people can do is, exercising their diaphragm to make sure it's nice and strong. So there's breathing exercises that they can do. They can also use an incentive spring spirometer, which is a device that helps you measure your lung capacity and thereby work on improving it. And then there's also breathing techniques that people can incorporate in order to help increase lung capacity so that they can breathe their absolute best and live as long as possible. We sleep well, we rest well, all of those things happen only in a parasympathetic state. And it's in that parasympathetic state that we heal every single organ, cell, and tissue in your body. Healing does not take place when our body is in fight or flight. So breathing is the bridge that helps us get out of that fight or flight state into that rest and digest state so that our body can do all the work that it magically does for us to heal us as well.
So some of the ways that I look at stress and how I help people recover from it are somewhat non-conventional. There's always the aspect, and I think this is across the board, you've always got issues of diet and exercise and supplements and repletion, and pretty much anyone can do that. But for me, what I find to really be the most powerful driver really comes down to our mind. Because what I find is that when we're under stress, we develop a disconnect between our brain and our body. And so then all this stressful input is coming in, and we're just taking it in and letting us eat it alive. So some of the things that I really, really focus on with my patients is really being in the moment, in the now, starting to recognize when you're caught up in that autopilot stage, which I think one of the most recent stats was I think 47% of the time people are in autopilot on their day. That's a lot of time missed, a lot of really precious moments missed because we're stuck in stress. So often we can't even implement the diet, the exercise, and the supplements because the mind isn't letting us do it. So that's a big part that I think a lot of physicians, even physicians that are aware of adrenal fatigue and stress impact, are not actually spending a lot of time with their patients on. So I think that's probably one of my biggest pieces of advice is to really hone in on that mind-body connection.
One of the biggest issues that people have are their thoughts. People are stuck in anxiety, worry, depression, and your thoughts create feelings in your body. Those feelings produce different actions. Those actions produce results. And when your thoughts run awry, your reality changes. You attract more of what you think about. And my job is to bring people hope, to give them the stories, to let them read the testimonials, to know there is hope, there is help. Some of these things are very simple. If you start imagining, believing, feeling what it would be like and rehearsing exactly what it'd be like to feel good again, it can happen because you create your reality with your thoughts. One of the techniques that I use to rewire your thoughts is this very simple process called heart math. And I have people focus on their heart, take some deep breaths, and be present. Think of something, someplace, somewhere that makes you feel unconditional love and gratitude. It changes your physiology because there are more connections from your heart to your brain than your brain to your heart. This puts you in the present moment where creation occurs, where you can actually make change. Because if you're thinking in the past, you're reliving the past. If you're worrying about the future, you're worrying about something that doesn't even exist. In the present moment, you can be creative. There are over 200 studies on this technique, and once you learn it, it can take seconds. You can do it anytime, any place, anywhere, with anyone. It's been shown to decrease anxiety and depression, to increase creativity, innovation, to help you with your productivity, and it allows you to calm your nervous system and find creative solutions to your problems. It's a miracle. One of my patients was able to rewire her brain. She had so much going on in her life. She was taking care of a mother with MS and dementia. Her health was suffering. She was trying to run a full-time business while taking care of her mother and taking care of her health. All three of these were full-time jobs. She became sensitive to just every type of food. She developed gastrointestinal issues, colitis, and never took the time for herself. Once she realized, that her mother, who she was close to, who was demented and was saying bad things about her, which was extremely hurtful, she realized, I helped her change her thinking about that's totally not true. And that she knows that what she is doing everything she can, and that she needed to do more for herself. Once she accepted that what her mother was saying was not true, and that she focused on all the things that she was doing for her, she was able to release some of that guilt and shame and frustration, and healing started to occur. She became less sensitive to foods. She had less flare-ups of her gastrointestinal symptoms. And I told her a story about what someone told me. You cannot get milk out of a horse. So when you try to expect something from someone that they can't give you, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So once you let go of that expectation and let go of it, I live in New York City, and if a crazy person came up to me and started shouting untruths to me, I would just let that roll off. And that's something that we have to learn how to do.
I completely agree with Dr. Lorraine Maite. We all want to live a long life that's peaceful and fulfilling. So we should all learn how to manage negative emotions and turn them into something positive. Thankfully, we can achieve inner happiness and gratitude with people supporting us. And fortunately, there are science-backed techniques that can help us overcome negative emotions, stress, anxiety, and trauma. We just need access to those tools and the guidance and support to stick to our self-care practice. Take, for example, a simple 10-minute practice like meditation or hypnotherapy. These techniques have changed the lives of millions of people. Meditation can teach you how to be your best self, release repressed emotions, and promote calm and well-being. Think of meditation as retraining your mind. You can try it right now by checking out Zonia's guided meditation and hypnotherapy and even sleep stories. Our experts teach you step-by-step techniques on how to deal with negative feelings, live in the present, and regulate your nervous system. This will help you gain control over your emotional and mental state and enjoy every moment of the day. Of course, these doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice, and that's where Zonia can help. Our mental health videos tutorials motivate your progress so you never get bored or overwhelmed. Check out the many shows and health bites dedicated